Beyond Reason Radio.
If you miss any of today's Beyond Reason Radio, how dare you? How dare you ever miss Beyond Reason Radio? Oh, Mike, what are you doing mocking a 16-year-old girl? How could you do that? Okay, fine. I won't do that. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason, the voice of truth in a world that is beyond reason. By the way, I'm not a big fan of what Trump did in his tweet against Greta. Not necessarily because he criticized her, because if you're Times Person of the Year, if you're traveling the globe lecturing the world on climate change, you have to be open to some criticism. I mean, no doubt. The problem I have with Trump when he does that is he takes personal shots, and that's not what I like. You know, he went, oh, she needs anger management classes and all that. Like, you're the president of the United States. Me even talking about this doesn't matter. The Trump supporters will say she deserves it. He fights. Okay, I get it. Fine. I just wanted to point out I'm not a huge fan of that. You know, if you're going to criticize them on the merits of their argument. Don't do these personal attacks against a 16-year-old girl who I really feels like being used by the movement more than anything. I mean, okay, we'll talk more about that in a sec. I have a lot to get to on this episode of Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We are on until 8 p.m. tonight, right here on News Radio WFLA Orlando. And once again, I'm also joined by Tom Benson producing. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing fine, and it's a spooky day. It's Friday the 13th. There's the remnants of a full moon out there somewhere, although we can't see because of all the clouds.
Yeah.
But I survived all right. I sat here with my football helmet on and didn't go anywhere.
I was wondering what that was about. Like, why do you have a helmet on, Tom Benson? Of course, they say those football helmets don't even work right. You still could get a concussion or something.
These things are heavy. They really are. I got a pain in my neck right now.
I thought for sure if you were going to wear a helmet, you would wear a baseball helmet. Because you're a baseball guy.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But you're so scared you need the full football helmet.
Right, I like the mouth guard area,
All right. Oh, okay, so we have a lot to get to. I have to talk about, because it's really been on my mind a lot for the past few days, I have to talk about the fact that Greta Thunberg, I'm saying Thunberg. Apparently it's Thunberg. You don't really say the H.
Oh.
It's a Swedish thing. I don't know. Greta Thunberg won Times Person of the Year. And, I tweeted out about this earlier this week, and the trolls got on me because, that's what they do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I said, even though she won Times Person of the Year, I would bet that most parents would not want their kid to emulate her. And people criticized me, said, you don't even have kids. What do you know? Okay, fine. I mean, I've been a youth leader. I've helped take care of kids. I just hate that argument. I wouldn't be able to say a lot of things. It's like I criticize Congress. You're not even in Congress. What do you know? If I criticize President Trump, you've never been president. What do you know? Like, come on, people. Like, I just such a shallow argument, in my opinion, when people go down that road. But the reason why I said that, though, is a really serious thing. It's because Time did a whole profile on her and what she did. You know what she did? Her whole movement started by her skipping school every day to go out and protest outside the Parliament building and yell about climate change. That's basically how her movement got started. So all these people that are criticizing me are telling me that they would want their kids right now to skip school every day, stop going to school because it's such a crisis, and maybe in Florida they go to Tallahassee or somewhere, or they go to D.C., and they just protest every day instead of going to school. That's what these people are telling me, that they would want their kids to do that and to start this movement on climate change because it's such a crisis that something has to be done right now. I don't buy it. I seriously, I don't buy it. I'm sorry. I don't think most parents would want their kids to do that. They could want them to get involved with some of these things, but she did more than get involved. She literally skipped school and protested and held up signs and said, this is so dire. And then she complained about them taking away her childhood. It's her choice. That was her choice. So, but I'm going to tell you what I think all this is really about in a moment and why it bothers me. You know, a lot of people mock her for what she said and kind of poke fun at her. But honestly, I mean, you could do that. And I did that last week with the Babylon Bee story I did, which was really funny. But honestly, she's actually a pretty charismatic speaker and person. And she could be a very effective leader in a lot of ways. Like, a lot of people are criticizing her. I tend not to underestimate her as much as some of these other people. I would not underestimate her. The fact she did get Time Magazine Person of the Year for a reason. But I think a lot of what she stands for, honestly, is kind of dangerous. I think it's beyond what people are thinking.
You really want to know why she got made Time Magazine's Person of the Year?
Why?
Time Magazine is dying, and they want millennials to subscribe. That's why they went with the young person, period.
Yeah, but they could have went with the Hong Kong protesters.
No, that's for democracy. We're not in favor of democracy here.
I mean, Donald Trump Jr. mentioned that the Hong Kong protesters should have got it. They most certainly, I tend not to like that they do these groups instead of individuals, but Time's done groups for a long time now. So if they're going to go down that road, then yes, the Hong Kong protesters definitely should have gone. I mean, they're literally risking their lives every day. But you know what they did, those protesters? They promoted America. Mm-hmm. They held American flags. Oh, you can't do that.
No.
You can't do that. So what I want to do here is actually play some of Greta Thunberg when she was in the UN earlier this year and the whole thing that went viral. But I want to play more of it. We always hear the first part of it, but I want to play her full comments and then react to it. Because I think it's pretty instructive on what's going on here. And frankly, I just don't buy the alarmist argument. I just don't buy it. I think she's completely serious. I think she believes it. But personally, I don't buy it, and I'll tell you why. But let's go back to the audio here and listen to Greta when she was at the UN not too long ago. Here it is.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
Okay, pause right there if you can, Tom Benson. So that's the part that everyone hears. And the first thing that I react to is, nobody stole your dreams. This is the big problem I have with what she said. She had a life. She had a future. But she's saying that it's so dire that people are dying. And I made the point earlier this week on PM Orlando. I'm going to make the point again. We have more people being lifted out of poverty on the planet right now than in the history of mankind. We are living in amazing, prosperous times. People in countries like India and China and other places in the world are being lifted out of poverty. Why? Because of things she doesn't like. Industrialization. And yes, fossil fuels. So, and people are living longer, prosperous lives. And yet she's saying it's such a crisis, we have to tear down that system. That's what I don't buy. Now, she continues on here.
This is all wrong.
Oh, started from the
I
beginning.
shouldn't be up here.
Now I gotta
I
listen to
should
this
be back
again?
in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all
Here we go.
come to us young.
Hold on.
We haven't done this in a while, so.
For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. Mm-hmm. How dare you continue to look away? and come here saying that you're doing enough when the politics and solutions needed are still nowhere in sight.
Okay, stop right there. What is she talking about? You have countries in Europe that have tried all kinds of renewable energy that sometimes backfires to the point where they have to start burning wood as a backup because it doesn't work as well. You have billions, if not trillions of dollars in the past 30 years all over Western nations of people investing in green technology. But it's not good enough. See, it's not going to be good enough. This is what really scares me, honestly. It always worries me when you have some kind of leader, and this is a girl, but she's echoing what other leaders are saying, that talk about drastic action that has to be done now. And conveniently, it's always government control, is it not? There's always a crisis that needs immediate action, and it takes the government taking away your liberties in order to accomplish it. And that's why I'm always like, wait. Shouldn't we maybe hold on to this a little bit? And their response will always be, no, how dare you? This is a crisis. When Donald Trump gave his inauguration speech, a lot of people thought it was dark and talked too much of crisis. How could he say that as president of the United States? Those same people won't criticize Greta for what she's saying.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It's always in the eyes of the beholder. She continues on here.
You say you hear us and that you understand the urgency. But no matter how sad and angry I am, I do not want to believe that. Because if you really understood the situation and still kept on failing to act, then you would be evil, and that I refuse to believe. The popular idea of cutting our emissions in half in 10 years only gives us a 50% chance of staying below 1.5 degrees and the risk of setting off irreversible chain reactions beyond human control.
Okay, stop right there. So she did two things. She said, if you don't take drastic action now, you're evil. But I refuse to believe you're just ignorant. She's watching. But if you know now and you don't take this drastic action, you're evil. See this kind of dire language? If someone on the right uses that kind of language for other things, we get blasted. But she's talking about the planet, so it's different. She's different, of course. I'm always skeptical when leaders use that dire language to promote government action. We all should be. The other thing she said there is you want to cut emissions by 50%. Even that's not good enough. Are you kidding me? I mean, are you joking? You're talking about cutting emissions by 50% in the world, and that's not good enough? That we need to... What is your plan then? I guarantee you her plan is something like the Green New Deal that AOC talked about. Total restructuring of our economy and Western civilization. Let's play a little bit more and then we'll take a break. Go ahead, Tom.
50% may be acceptable to you, but those numbers do not include tipping points, most feedback loops, additional warming hidden by toxic air pollution, or the aspects of equity and climate justice. They also rely on my generation sucking hundreds of billions of tons of your CO2 out of the air with technologies that barely exist. So a 50% risk is simply not acceptable to us, we who have to live with the consequences. To have a 67% chance of staying below a 1.5 degrees of global temperature rise, the best odds given by the IPCC, the world had 420 gigatons of CO2 left to emit back on January 1st, 2018.
Yeah, we're still all here.
Today that figure is already down to less than 350 gigatons. How dare you pretend that this can be solved with just business as usual and some technical solutions? With today's emissions levels, that remaining CO2 budget will be entirely gone within less than 8.5 years.
Okay, stop. We're going to take a break here in a sec. By the way, I am going to talk, what's going on with the Inspector General's report, impeachment, and all that stuff in a moment, but I just have to mention, listen to what she's saying there. What she wants is radical change. And a lot of people will praise her right now until you hear exactly what it would take to implement the stuff that she wants. How many people will be thrown into poverty because of stuff that she wants? Oh, but it's for the planet, you see. Then people will die. And I guess the people at Time Magazine won't care. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
You know what's beyond reason? Yaffee is now on YouTube. Go to YouTube now and just search Beyond Reason Radio. Your voice of truth in a world of fake news. Beyond Reason Radio continues right now.
Welcome back to the show. This is Orlando's Smart Talk Radio, Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason. We've been talking about the fact that Greta Thunberg got Times Person of the Year, and, you know, Trump blasted her personally. I'm not in the interest in doing that, really. You know, I might mock a little bit of what she says, but she's open for criticism if she's going to be on the world stage. But mostly what I want to criticize is what she's all about. You know, in a cut that we just played there, she talked about how people are dying, children are going to not be as healthy and all this stuff because of climate change. But when you look at the stats, all you have to look is over the past 50 years, life expectancy has grown exponentially across the world. Across the world. It's amazing. This is from our world indata.org. They said since 1950, many of us have not updated our worldview. We still tend to think of the world as divided as it was in 1950. But in health and many other aspects, the world has made rapid progress. Today, most people in the world can expect to live as long as those in the very richest countries in 1950. Today's global average life expectancy of 71 years is higher than that of any country in 1950, with the exception of a handful in Northern Europe. The reason I point this out is I keep hearing that there's such a crisis and that people are dying, yet when you look at the statistics of what's going on with people in the world, we live in the most prosperous time in the history of mankind. That's why it's hard for me to buy what they're saying. Another reason it is, I'll get to in a moment. But I want to play another cut here from Greta. This is actually from this week. Shortly after she was made Times Person of the Year. Her tone is changing, which I find fascinating. She's probably realizing that being all dark and pessimistic doesn't necessarily work. But here is her this week.
We need a balance of optimism and outrage. We need optimism to keep going and to not give up. And optimism comes from action. And once we start to act, there will be a lot of hope. And we need outrage to be able to step out of our comfort zones. And I'm sure that if people heard what was going on and what was said during these COPs, during these meetings, they would be outraged. So yeah, we need both of them in a very fine balance.
So all of a sudden it sounds a little more optimistic, which I find kind of fascinating, honestly. Here's the thing that really bothers me about her movement. And I've talked about this before, and it's the same with all the global warming stuff. Al Gore calls it an inconvenient truth, but it's very convenient for those who want bigger government, who want more socialism, who want more control over the economy. All of a sudden, it's very convenient for those people. Let me just read some of Greta Thunberg she wrote an op-ed this year in Project Syndicate. Here's something what she said, talking about the action that needs to be taken, because science demands it, of course. There's always a crisis that needs to be used for more government control. It says the action must be powerful and wide-ranging. After all, the climate crisis is not just about the environment. Of course, you thought it was about science. It is a crisis of human rights, of justice, and political will. colonial, racist, and patriarchal systems of oppression have created and fueled it. Did you know that, all the prosperity we have in America, by a lot by fossil fuels, which has made all of us richer in this country, that you're really just part of the colonial, racist, and patriarchal system of oppression?
Oh, yeah.
Tom Benson.
I believe that.
When
Sure.
when I fill up my SUV and drive home, I'm like, man, I hate this colonial, racist, patriarchal tool of oppression making me drive this nice SUV home.
In my air conditioning.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then she says this: we need to dismantle them all. Our political leaders can no longer shirk their responsibilities. So she talks about dismantling our system of economics in Western civilization, and then she points to the political leaders. You need to take action. Gee, I wonder what that action is. You think it's more freedom for the individual? You think it's more freedom for the entrepreneur? Do you think it's lower taxes and a better economy? Or do you think it's more government control? What do you think it is? We all know what it is. This is all an excuse for socialism. She probably doesn't realize that, but it's obvious to someone like me who's been watching this stuff for a long time. She could have went to school, studied the science, entered academia or politics, had a reasonable debate about things we need to do to better protect the environment and all that, but she didn't want to do that. She wanted to skip school, and then she says she wants people to panic. That is her goal. She wants people to panic. What's another reason, though, why I don't buy this argument? Because if we really believed this, the first thing we would do? We would bring much more nuclear energy to the world. Nuclear energy is one of the easiest ways to control carbon emissions in the world right now. And it's a useful technology that works. Now, there is the go-ahead for Florida reactors to continue having nuclear energy. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission for the first time extended a nuclear plant's license so it can operate for 80 years. This is in South Florida, and they're hoping more will follow suit. But the environmentalists are gonna hate that.
Of course.
But I'm thinking, if the crisis is carbon emissions, if that is the crisis, because they don't mind tearing up a lot of landmass to put solar panels down, or digging up a lot of minerals to build the solar panels, or using a lot of metals and plastics and landmass to build wind turbines and all that stuff. What do you think? That stuff's not made out of leaves and grass. It's made out of raw materials. They don't mind using that. But then when you talk about nuclear energy, which would be one of the most effective ways to reduce carbon emissions, which I'm heard is the threat, then all of a sudden they don't like it. This is why I don't buy it. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Subscribe to the Beyond Reason podcast today on your Stitcher app and hear the voice of reason anytime. Your safe space for conservative thought, not for political correctness. Yaffee is back right now.
So I did get a comment on Facebook Live that said, last 3 years, life expectancy has gone down in the U.S. Yes, I know. I was talking about life expectancy across the world. We live in the most prosperous times in the history of the world where billions are being lifted out of poverty. But I know life expectancy has gone down in the U.S. I actually talked about that on last week's Beyond Reason in great detail. Obviously, they weren't listening. But the reason why it's going down in the U.S. has nothing to do with climate change. It has to do basically with drug overdoses. And like I said, if you listen to the podcast of last week's show, I talk extensively about that in last week's show. So check the podcast out wherever podcasts are available. I want to move on here now to something else that's kind of disturbing that's going on in our own government. Yes, everyone's talking about impeachment, but the other big story from this week is the fact that the Inspector General's report came out on what happened with the FBI and their Crossfire Hurricane investigation into the Trump campaign. Now, the left immediately grabbed onto the title that said, there was no political bias. But if you look at it, and I read the executive summary, and I read a lot of the report with the Inspector General, there are a lot of major problems with what the FBI did. But it's patently obvious what was happening. even if they didn't realize they were being biased, they believed it. Now, I've noticed this trend on the left. I don't know if you noticed this too, Tom Benson. But you know what the left's big argument now is supporting what the FBI did? They're basically pushing the narrative that the Steele dossier is true.
Okay.
That the Steele dossier is true, it's legitimate, and we should believe it. So, of course, the FBI is going to do it because it's the Steele dossier. It's very, very, very credible. Very, very true. If that's where you're going, you have a weak argument. I'm sorry. If that's where you're having to go to make the argument, I don't think you're going to be able to do it. But they relied heavily on it. And so I just want to mention that Florida Roundtable I host every week, syndicated across Florida. This week, I got to interview Kimberly Strassel from the Wall Street Journal. She has a new book out called Resistance at All Costs, and she knows a lot about this stuff. And if you want to hear that interview, you can listen to the Florida Roundtable tomorrow night at 9 p.m. on News Radio, on here, WFLA Orlando. I'm going to post the podcast later as well. But I asked her about the Inspector General's report, and she had a good comment. Here it is.
Despite not being able to find any documentary evidence of bias, that he has all these violations on record and that nobody at the FBI was able to give them a legitimate excuse for why they happened. And to me, when you read that, that is the Inspector General saying, okay, folks, I don't have smoking gun proof for you, but you take a look at the facts I just presented you. You take note of the fact that all of these violations cut the same way against Donald Trump, and then you make your own decisions about what motivated that, why the FBI misbehaved.
Interesting that it's all those mistakes, those so-called errors that were not politically biased, cut in the same way, like she said there. Notice that? They all went in the same direction, and that was against Donald Trump. Now, why is that? Well, I was not one who totally believed that this was all orchestrated by the Obama administration to spy on the Trump campaign. The only reason I didn't necessarily believe that is I don't think anyone expected Trump to win. So for them doing that, I think, frankly, that the likes of Comey and them, they just hated Trump so much that they just believed it. That instead of doing the actual background information, that they found the Steele dossier and were like, well, this must be true because it's about Trump and I don't like Trump. Another person who was making that point was Jim Garrity. He writes for the National Review. He spoke about this on the National Review podcast, The Editors, which I listen to every now and then. Here's what he said.
I'll be honest, I'm not so sure I believe that these are all just random, innocent mistakes that all happen to line up against Carter Page. And while I've never, look, Trump's idea of, they were wiretapping Trump Tower and all that stuff, of course Trump over-dramatizes things. Of course Trump loses attention, doesn't pay attention to the details of, that's who Trump is. But what seems very likely here, one step down from the vast left-wing conspiracy, to paraphrase what Hillary Clinton said, is the idea of groupthink, the idea that everybody involved in this process looked at Trump, looked at the stuff he was saying about Russia, looked at his business connections and said, oh, yeah, this guy's a crook. There's got to be something bad going on here. Whether it's compromat, whether it's all this kind of stuff, something stinks here, and if we look hard enough, we're going to find it.
I think both sides should be a little disturbed at what went on in the FBI. The left doesn't seem to care all of a sudden. Could you imagine if it was reversed, by the way? I mean, that's what's so funny about all this. If you imagine if it was reversed, I guess Republicans might be hypocrites too in that situation. But what we found out, honestly, when it comes to the FBI and the investigation into Trump, is that it was way too easy for them to do this, to use stuff in place to investigate. The FISA court, the reason why it, was implemented was more about seeing what's going on in foreign countries. And it became stronger after 9/11. It's been around since longer than that. But they were basically using excuses to spy not on foreign assets, but on Americans. And they'll say, well, Carter Page is a foreign asset. Okay, you had very, very flimsy evidence to back that up, just like the Papadopoulos thing. There was just one conversation that they heard Papadopoulos say something. They immediately started a full-fledged investigation called Crossfire Hurricane. Then went and got Carter Page stuff, FISA documents. Then they got inside sources that were basically spying on the Trump campaign and all of that stuff. And nobody's concerned about this. They were doing this to a presidential candidate. If they did it to that, what do you think they would do to you? The fact is, a lot of this was just a little too easy to do. Now, I want to move on to something else as well when it comes to Adam Schiff and something he did. It came out recently that Adam Schiff, in the investigation, got the phone records. And basically, he subpoenaed Rudy Giuliani and Parnas, that one Ukrainian guy. But he also unmasked the people like Devin Nunes and John Solomon. And I think this is a big problem when you're looking at the bigger picture, much bigger than anything else. When you look at what's going on there, Adam Schiff talked about it on Face the Nation this week. Here's what he said.
The blowback has only come from the far right. But look, every investigator seeks phone records to corroborate, sometimes to contradict a witness's testimony. And here we had testimony that the president charged Rudy Giuliani with carrying out this plot, that he told Ambassador Volker and Perry and Sondland to talk to Rudy. And, in fact, Ambassador Volker testified about talking to Rudy. And so, naturally, we wanted phone records to show they had those conversations, and, indeed, they did. But it's very important to point out, Margaret, we did not subpoena Devin Nunes call records. We did not subpoena any journalist call records. And that is simply false information being pushed by the president's allies. But the fact that Mr. Nunes or Giuliani or others show up in this scheme doesn't make them irrelevant, doesn't give them a pass.
So when you're looking at this, I think there's a bigger picture here. And frankly, I think Republicans are kind of hypocrites on this one. Because years ago, when Edward Snowden came out and revealed a lot of the spying that was going on by the NSA, where they were collecting phone records and all of this stuff, a lot of Republicans, frankly, at the time were saying, yeah, but they're not really collecting the contents of the call. They're just collecting the metadata. You know, who they're calling and yada, yada, yada. And it's just against foreigners. We're not looking at this stuff. It's just metadata, and you can't really do a whole lot with the metadata. So what Edward Snowden is worried about is just an exaggeration. It's not that big of a deal. And I remember saying at the time, I disagreed with a lot of Republicans. I said, this to me is dangerous. Even if it's just the metadata, this is dangerous. This is giving the government a lot of power. And even with just that metadata, you can use that to smear people as much as you want. And that's exactly what's happened here. And Republicans were all for this, and now they're against it, which I'm saying there's hypocrisy. And then, of course, the Democrats, who were worried about it back then, all of a sudden don't care. But with the metadata and just who was making the calls, look what Adam Schiff was able to do here. And this can go both ways. This is why I'm saying more people should be worried about it. But he was able to just put it out there in this report. And just the fact that the call records are there as a part of this report, he was able to smear the ranking Republican in his own committee, Devin Nunes. Does no one else see this as a problem? You don't even have to know the contents of the call. We don't know the contents of the call. We don't know if it was legitimate. We don't know anything else. All we know is he made certain calls to certain people, and they weren't even that long. And that means he's guilty of something, you see. So you can put that out against your political opponents and smear them. Is no one else worried about this? And notice what he said there. Well, we didn't subpoena the records of Devin Nunes. We didn't subpoena the records of John Solomon. Well, that's not the point. A lot of times they don't even subpoena the records of American citizens. They do it against foreigners. But all it takes is you use a subpoena against someone else, and then you unmask the person, like Devin Nunes, that you don't like, and you just kind of put it out there in a report. You have no real evidence other than some phone call records. You put it out there in a report, and all of a sudden, you are smeared. Is no one else worried about this? I think this is a dangerous precedent we're setting. And I guarantee you, just like, with impeachment, if we keep going down this road of impeachment, Republicans are going to fight back because it's a weak case, so Republicans are going to fight back later on. It's the same thing with stuff like this. Once you set the precedent, it can go both ways. And then later on in a couple of years, all of a sudden the Democrats are going to be using this. But I've noticed that when it comes to impeachment, most things that I hear is it's just what you believe about Trump. Nobody really cares about the actual evidence. If you love Trump, it's just, oh, well, then Trump did nothing wrong at all. And then if you hate Trump, it's, well, he must be guilty of everything that he's being accused of, instead of actually looking at the evidence before we impeach a duly elected president. We had a process called an election where if you believe the worst of Trump, you can vote him out. But that's not where we are in today's world, I guess. We have more to get to in a moment. We'll end with something that made Yaffee Laffee. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you like Beyond Reason Radio, well, make sure to show it by liking the Facebook page at facebook.com/Beyond Reason Radio. The place where we talk faith, culture, and politics. Beyond Reason Radio continues.
Yes, welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason, the voice of truth in a world that is beyond reason. We are on till 8 p.m. tonight right here on News Radio WFLA Orlando. But if you miss any of the show, you can catch the podcast anywhere that podcasts are available. You know, is it that time, Tom Benson?
I think it is.
Is it that time of the show once again?
Yes. All the kids are lined up outside the window here.
Yeah.
They're ready to. They got their mittens on. They got their boots.
In Florida, and it's like 80 degrees. Yes. It is time. We're cruel if we're making all the kids wear mittens and boots in this weather. It is time once again for something that made Yaffee Laffee. Yeah, yes, it is that time again. And we have to go to the Peloton thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's the big issue of the decade, I think, is this commercial with the Peloton where she gets a Peloton exercise bike and people said it was sexist. Well, then Ryan Reynolds recruits the Peloton girl and uses her for one of his commercials to sell his gin company, his own company. And it's actually really good. The girl from the Peloton commercial, she's actually a pretty good actress, it looks like. I mean, at least kind of decent the way she does this commercial. But it's hilarious. You have to go actually see the video. We just had the audio here, but you got to go see the video. But let's go ahead and play that commercial. It aired, I think, last weekend. But if you missed it, here it is. This is her just staring at the screen. They're at a bar. She just stares, awkwardly and sad.
This gin is really smooth.
Yeah.
That's her friends.
We can get you another one if you like. You're safe here. To new beginnings.
To new beginnings.
And she drinks one. Keeps drinking.
There you go. This can be a fun night.
Drinks another one.
Take this too.
Really? Mm-hmm. You look great, by the way.
You get it? You look great, by the way. That last line is what makes it great. So Ryan Reynolds puts that out. That's amazing. I'm glad she was able to kind of, make fun of it. That's what you have to do. But I mean, both Tom Benson and I still don't understand what the big deal was with this commercial.
No, I don't.
I mean, who cares? But she was actually on. The girl from that commercial was actually on. I believe it was Today, the Today Show, and she was asked, why do you think people were so divided and some people were so upset about this commercial you were in and you didn't even see it coming? Here's her response.
I mean, honestly, I think it was just my face. Like,
what do you mean?
It was my fault. My eyebrows looked like worried, I guess.
I don't know. There's a picture behind me, y'all. That's the one that she says is at the heart of this whole thing.
I'm telling you, it was my face. That was the problem. And it just went, exploded from there. She looks worried, and I'm like, oh no, my eyebrows.
They moved.
They moved.
So I guess a lot of people have Botox and stuff, and their eyebrows stay straight.
We're not used to seeing it anymore. It's too much.
So I'm glad she's able to laugh about it, but she says it was her face because she looked like worried or whatever. And then they posted the picture of part of the Peloton commercial with her face.
Mm-hmm.
But when you watch the commercial, I guess I should have grabbed the audio from the original commercial. But if you watch the commercial, she does have a worried look in her face before one part, but that's before her first time using the exercise bike with the program. So when you get a Peloton exercise bike, it comes with a screen, and you have a program, and they have this whole thing where you're part of the program. You watch, and it's a challenge. It's supposed to be really, really challenging. It's the whole point of the thing.
And you pay for those videos every month. It's a monthly fee.
Yeah, it's like $30, which is a lot. Yeah. But yeah, so she was worried. She looks a little worried because she's about to start, and it's a challenge. She's like, I'm a little nervous. What is wrong with this? I don't understand. Like, I understand making fun of it a little bit because, you can have fun with things. But there were people who were seriously upset at this commercial.
They thought, well, she's rail thin already, and her husband wants her to stay that way and not put on any weight. So that's being, I guess, sexist.
It's just, you talk about beyond reason. It's amazing to me that it went this far because I saw that because I have Hulu and they have ads and they have Peloton ads all the time. So I saw the commercial before the whole controversy. It didn't even cross my mind. Maybe I'm just naive or something. But it didn't even cross my mind that there was something offensive in it. Because I know girls who like working out, who like the challenge, who would love something like that because of the challenge of working out. And a lot of those girls are thin, but they still want to be in better shape. They want to be healthy, and they want their heart to be healthy. There's more than just losing weight when it comes to working out. And I know these girls, and I'm thinking, when I watch the commercial, I'm thinking, as soon as she receives it, she knows what it is. She goes, it's a Peloton. And I think the whole point of the commercial is she wanted it or wanted something like it or is really into something like that. And the husband was just giving her something she wanted. And I remember I tweeted out right after the controversy, I said, so a husband giving his wife something that she likes and wants is now controversial? Is this where we are in today's world? Getting a present that you obviously are excited about and like and want is now seen as controversial. So there. This is why everyone just gives everyone gift cards now. This is why we're at the point where everyone just gives a gift card because it's of course, you can't give a gift card to a gym, I guess, or something like that. So
well, the great thing about a Peloton is that in 6 months, it becomes a great plant holder.
Yeah, like all those other exercise bikes.
Yeah, right, all the others. And that treadmill over there in the closet. Yeah, I don't need that anymore.
So for my Christmas present, I asked for a smartwatch. I might be getting a smartwatch.
Oh, boy.
But I have to turn off all of the exercise features because I really am not excited about my watch lecturing me on how unhealthy I am or something.
Michael, you have problems. Exercise. Get up, walk around.
I actually do work out, try to work out almost every day. But I mean, like, do I want to be lectured by my watch?
You push away from the kitchen table, right?
I lift up the burger, that I'm about to eat. All right, I appreciate you listening to the show. If you miss any of the show, you can catch the podcast anywhere that podcasts are available. Beyond Reason Radio on the iHeartRadio app, anywhere else. You can also like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. Follow me on Twitter at PMOWFLA, and I'll see you guys next time.